Hi, I'm Tim Kent. I was born in 1957, and I grew up between Campbell and Locust Grove. I went to New Albany High School, and started playing baseball at an early age for Little League. And we lived several miles out, so I didn't get to come into the city a lot and play baseball with neighbors. And but I played every year since I was 6, I guess. And just because I loved it, I stuck with it. And then my 13th year, you couldn't play Little League anymore. At that time, we played a Little League up beside the high school where a parking lot is now. And the city didn't have a park commission that ran it like they do now. So it was just kind of an independent thing. And they would get sponsors. And at that time, you would have, it's not like now, you wouldn't have traveling teams like you do now, but we did have one traveling team for all of New Albany, and you had to try out for it. And because I played Little League when I was young, my parents couldn't really get me to Little League and traveling teams both, so I just stuck with Little League. But when I was 13, there wasn't any more Little League, so I tried out for the older traveling team, and something just happened. I never was really good up until then, and or I didn't think I was, but something just happened when I got to the older traveling team, and I started playing really good and hitting it well, and it just kind of took off from there. Maybe a lot of that was confidence, I don't know. But I stuck with baseball, and I always loved football. And so when I think my 6th grade year, I got 2 toes cut off in a tractor accident, so I couldn't play my 7th grade year. And that's when we started then. And then when 8th grade come along, I went out for the football team and kind of hung around till maybe high school, 10th grade, and just kind of took off there with that career. I was very fortunate that, and I don't really know how they do it now, but then the players named who they thought were most valuable player. And so my senior year, I was named most valuable player in football and baseball at New Albany. I made all conference in both. And then I went to Northeast Junior College and played both. It was all state in both. And then after that, I went to University of North Alabama, played both for 1 year. And in my senior year, the baseball coach told me, and the reason I played both is to get my schooling paid for. But the baseball coach told me my senior year I'd made all conference my junior year in baseball, and I was just an average football player up there. But he said, if you don't want to play football next year, I'll pay for all your schools. So I took him up on it, because at each level up you take, it gets a lot rougher. You know, people are a lot bigger and stronger, and so I took him up on it. And after my senior year, I got drafted as a free agent by the Kansas City Royals. Had a brief stay with them. You know, when I look back, I've had people ask me to have any regrets. I think one of my major regrets, probably the coaches then didn't get paid a lot, the teachers and coaches either. And so all the coaches had a part-time job in the summer. So they really didn't push us to work out or lift weights, or there's a weight machine down there, but they wouldn't open it unless a coach could be there, and most of the time they couldn't. So, you know, if I had one regret, it'd be I should have worked harder in high school. But I went from being nothing to thought I was good, so I didn't work much at it, or as much as I should have. I did work at it, but not near as hard as I should have. But I think my first year in high school, then we played, there wasn't any classifications, it was it's just all conferences. We were in the Little 10 conference, which consisted of New Albany and West Point, Starkville, Oxford, Pontotoc, Aberdeen, Amory, and maybe Corinth. but we'd play usually the first two games. We played Ripley, which was the rival first game. And then we either played Lafayette or South Panola the second game. And my first year, my sophomore year, I think, we was going into West Point undefeated. No, and the town just kind of gravitated toward us because it'd been many years since the New Albany team had won the first two games even. And we got beat 6-0, I think. But I'll never forget, we had a guy fly over our practice field that week, and he had his own airplane, and he dropped out little leaflets about trying to get us motivated to beat West Point. We never beat West Point my years in college, in high school, but we was always a 2 or 6 point game, so it was very close with them.
What year was that?
That was in 75, 74, 75, 76. But this wasn't it. You played 10 games, and that was it. You either won a conference or you didn't. And there wasn't any moving on in playoffs then. Which the best thing, probably, in my opinion, has ever happened is to classify schools and, let them play schools their own size. We rarely ever did that, but we were just in that conference. And I think in the early 60s or late 50s is when New Albany got in the Little 10. And they had some good teams then. But just the 1 year we had a good team. And our community got behind us, even flew planes over and dropped leaflets. So I don't know if that'd be allowed now.
Who do you think that was that dropped the
I
leaflets?
think it was Gerald Maxey. Because he had an airplane. And I don't know if he poured the leaflets out, but I think he was flying the plane maybe.
Do you remember what they said?
Yeah, I said, you've come back like champions now, let's get after West Point. Because it had been a few years since New Albany had beat West Point.
Who was your coach then?
Coach was Jack Stanley, who was the head coach, and we had a guy named Coach McAllister was there, and then Coach Wade Ivey, and Coach Hall Wilbanks was Coach Wilbanks passed away now, but Coach Ivey and Coach Stanley and Bill Lancaster was the other name. He played at State, and he was assistant coach.
What position did you play in football?
I played fullback and linebacker, and I thought the other day when I went to speak to the football team, New Albany, man, these guys are huge, and I was a bigger fullback linebacker. I was 5'11", 190, 195, and that was a big guy then, especially being a running back position or a linebacker, either one. And man, those guys now, I don't know why, but they're just 6'5", 6'6", and 220 to 30. When I played, even in college, if you weighed 250 or 60 pounds, you were big. Now they got them every day in high school. It's amazing to me. And what makes them grow like that, I have no idea. But they do encourage them to work out in the summer, and that helps as far as weight, but it doesn't put height on you. It's just a lot bigger game now and a lot faster game. But I stand on the sidelines down there at New Albany and some Northeast games, and I can tell they're just so much faster and bigger than we were.
Well, with considering all that, so what do you tell them to motivate them?
Well, my point, I had 2 points, and one was don't miss a day of practice or workouts in high school, because you can even get to my age and realize, man, I could have done better. And I tried to instill in them that they would too. If they didn't try their hardest every day, even in high school, they would regret it one day. It wasn't until I got into college I figured out, man, I got to work, because they were, people in college as good as you are. That was one of my points, and I had 3 points. The other one was this town loves you and wants to get behind you, and don't give them a reason not to, because they're just itching to. And the other, third and maybe most important reason, for years, Dr. H.F. Mason had told me I was the best baseball player he's ever seen in New Albany. He was young then, and I broke a bat one time. We used wooden bats then, and I guess the team threw it away. Well, he got it and nailed it together and taped it up, and just thought he was good because he could use my bat. And now, since Eli Whiteside's come along, he thinks I'm the second best baseball player that's ever come. And I agree. I don't even know if I was the best ever, but you know, I told him that some kid was looking at him that they didn't even realize. And it wasn't until 20 years later that I realized Dr. Mason looked up to me like that. I never knew that. But that really made me start thinking, you know, I hope I did everything right then. You know, I hope I wasn't a bad influence or, you know, bad role model for those guys. But if he did, somebody else probably did, some other kid, you know. So I told them those are my 3 points, you know. This town's ready to get behind you, and don't take off even when you think nobody's looking, because it will catch up with you. And then always, and that taking off a day of practice, you know, kids look at that too. Young kids look how hard you work at it. And you know, now I'm the mayor, and I can see that's kind of transformed into the workforce, because I've never had this problem. I've been mayor for 19 years and never had that problem of hiring people. But now, you know, some of the places we hire them, they might come to work today and decide they don't want to work tomorrow, and they just don't show up. And I've put up with a lot more than I ever thought I did, because you can't fire them all, you know, and I think they know that. But that work habit takes place in high school, and maybe before, even in junior high, that you've got to show up every day and at least try. You won't be as good as you were or as you hoped to be that day, but you did try your hardest. And that's the things that I wanted to tell them, not to regret anything when they got older, you know, which, you know, they will, everybody does, but that part I hope they don't.
As an employer of a lot of people, being the mayor and seeing this workforce and that over a period of time, do you see that people who were athletes in school have a different kind of way of working or attitude towards work?
Yeah, absolutely. It's, you know, I didn't want to say that because a lot of ours weren't athletes, but yeah, I mean, some of the leaders of our departments were athletes in high school and college, and it's because they show up every day and they try their hardest, and that gets you a lot, you know, gets you promoted more in life than just showing up when you want to. We just unfortunately had to get rid of one guy, and since August he's missed 46 days, which in a few months. So he was just coming to work when he wanted to, and you know, we put up with a lot, but I don't think we can put up with something like that.
So you see the value of sports and what it does to a young person and how it forms a young
Absolutely.
person.
You know, like I said, I did work at it in high school, but not near. I mean, I always think I didn't work as hard as I could have until I got in college. And, you know, when you get into better competition or in college, either you got to work hard or you're going to be left behind. And that's kind of when I got my motivation. You know, you either have to make a decision, go to work or go home, you know. And it transferred over into work life and everyday life. It's the same thing with everyday life. Some days are not going to be good, but you got to fight through it. But athletics definitely taught me that. If it didn't teach me anything else, and it taught me that pretty boldly too, that if you work at it, you can be as good as anybody else, and maybe better than some.
Well, tell me about being drafted to play baseball.
I got drafted by the Royals, and they call it a free agent then, which means you went through all the rounds. You weren't drafted. So I went to Sarasota, Florida, to Kansas City Royals camp. And, you know, I stayed a few weeks, but they didn't really, I could tell they weren't really, I'd torn my knee up my senior year, tore an ACL, so I had to limp around a little bit. But basically they told me they thought I could play Double-A right now and be a star, but they thought I was 4 years away from being knowing enough to go to the major leagues, and I'd be 26 then. That's just kind of too old to be a rookie. I think they've changed their thinking now because there's a lot of 30-year-old rookies in there. But in those times, you know, they wanted you in major leagues by the time you was 22 or 3 or 4 at the latest. So they didn't give me much hope. They told me I could stay, but I thought, well, and I think they've kind of fixed this too, but then in the minor leagues, you know, 4 of you had to live together to even have enough money to pay the rent. So it wasn't, you know, you're making a lot of money. It was a struggle to stay. And, you know, I just came home because I thought I could do better back here in New Albany.
Yeah. What position did you play in baseball?
I played outfield, mostly center field. I played a little bit of catcher in high school, but when I got in college, I played all outfield. And
yeah.
Got good speed, you know, pretty good speed, so I did all right, you know. But just wasn't meant to be.
Who was your high school baseball coach?
My high school coach, Kennedy, he passed away several years ago, but he had played in the Negro League from years earlier. He was a really good coach. And then he retired, and I had a guy named Coach McKinney, coached my senior year. And he had moved here from West Point. And he coached a few years after that, and then he moved over too.
Now, when you were in high school, where did y'all play your baseball games?
We played where the football team practices now, behind the high school. We had a baseball field there, and then in the left field area was West Schooler Field for the T-ball. And I've hunted that sign, and I thought Bull Spencer may have got it when they redid all that down there. So I called his son, Ray, and he said, yeah, it was laid here. He said, they just took it home because they was supposed to put in a garbage truck, but it sat here, leaned up against our building for years, and now it's gone. I don't remember who got it or don't know who got it. I just like to get it. I mean, it may not mean anything to the young kids now, but it, you know, there's a lot of people have remembrance of Wes Schooler being at baseball games and hollering. That's all he did, you know, holler. But it was just a fun if he was there.
Tell me about him. What do you know about him?
He had a mental issue, and I don't know. I'd heard he got kicked by a cow when he was little. I don't know if that's true, but he was smart enough to get around, but and take care of himself apparently. But he had mental challenges, and he loved baseball. And I remember when I got in college, talking to a guy from Iuka that Wes was out in right field. He didn't know anybody was around, and they were in the field, and one of us had hit a home run. They said, "Man, this guy went to screaming." Well, he was young. He was like a freshman or sophomore in college, and so he started running into the dugout. And the coach that caught him said, "What are you doing?" But I mean, he was he's around the field, and if New Albany did anything good, he would just start screaming, and you could hear him everywhere. And I've heard stories about him. And I was in a barbershop when I was a young kid, and he walked in there, and he acted like he was throwing a baseball and then calling us on strikes, and they gave him some money, and so he hollered. That's what people would do downtown, give him some money so he'd yell. And you could hear him all over town. He could do that. But he did go to, Mr. Bull Spencer took him to Tupelo one time. And before I started playing, New Albany was playing. And they locked him up. I thought he was drunk. So they had to go get him out, but he never would go back to Tupelo. Bull would ask him. And Bull, I don't know if he ever missed a New Albany game of football, basketball, or baseball. I think he was probably at every game for years that they ever played.
Bull.
Bull Spencer, yeah. He was a good one. He owned a store on Clark Street, which is Nichols Grocery now. And the shirt factory was there then, and he had a tremendous business at lunch because they would sell sandwiches. So he had the freedom to go whenever he wanted to. And he would go to all the ball games.
So did he start that store? Was that?
Yeah, I think so, yeah. In the 50s, I believe he told me. He worked at the Park Commission a little while after he sold that store. And I worked there during the summer in high school and college, but he'd tell me stories about that store. And obviously he made a good living at it. I do remember going in there a time or two, and they would have change out all, he and his wife, all over the counter. And when those people started coming in, they were raking change everywhere. So, that shirt factory then employed a lot of people. I would guess 200 or 300. But they fed most of them at lunch in 30 minutes, It was kind of amazing when you sit back and think about it.
Where you grew up, was there a little store like that?
There was a store, then there were country stores. And I grew up between Locust Grove and Campbell, and there was actually it was 2 stores at Campbell. And I had some neighbor boys, and all our parents worked then, So I remember calling my mother a few times and asked her, could I ride to the store on my bike, which is 2.5 miles away. And I thought I was going to 30 East a couple of weeks ago, and I thought, I can't believe my mother ever let me, I'd ride by myself. And I can't believe she ever let me ride a bike up through here. But then, it wasn't any danger, I don't guess. You might get hit, but people abducting you. But that's a long way to ride now. I couldn't do it now, but I'd just go get a Coke and something and ride back.
You would definitely get run over now.
Absolutely, yeah. Because, there wasn't as much traffic then. There was traffic, but you could ride a lot out on the edge of the highway and wouldn't have to worry about it.
I can't imagine a bike being on that highway today.
Ooh, I know it.
I would.
Coming back, it
odds
was
were
hard
not
because
good.
there was a couple of big hills coming back to my house. And my neighbors, they were a couple of years younger than me, but their parents, they were both at work, but they wouldn't let them ride so I would get them something too when I'd go, we'd kind of pool our money. But those old country stores, people nowadays don't remember them, but they were very interesting to be around.
Are there any more still out there?
Not that I know. At Anderson Grocery out around Alpine still there, but it's the only one that I know of. And, the conversation was, why do not as many people vote now as they once did? And I think I was talking to Lynn West one day, and I told him, I said, well, I remember when I was young, that's all they did is sit around those country stores and talk about politics, especially when it come time for Union County or New Albany politics. And they'd guess on who would win, and one would be supporting one the other. And I remember that, just as far as going in and out of the store, hearing those guys. And then they also voted at these country stores. So I guess it was just more interest then, which is a shame now. Because I think only 34 or 5% voted in the last county election, which is kind of sad. But people have more to think. I know they have more to think about now, more on their mind. And most people, if they remember it, they will. But a lot of times they don't remember.
You think Dollar General has taken over the spaces?
The country stores, yeah, I do. They've got it figured out.
They just need to put a porch on it.
Yeah, that's all they need. Yeah, I don't think they want you hanging around there too much. Yeah. But Yeah, I don't know. They've got the right formula figured out, 'cause they've got stores everywhere.